Hi, everyone. Welcome to the EBPL podcast. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Paul. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at East Brunswick Public Library. I'm joined by Krystal Langford, who is the Vice President of the Lost Souls Memorial Project and also the Chair of Education and Research for the project as well. So, Krystal, thank you for joining me. If you could just expound a bit on how you got involved and what exactly that entails on your end.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us as an institution. So, as the chair of education and research, pretty much I supervise the research of our interns who go into the archives and pull the data. And then the education piece is the education committee who takes this information and turn these primary sources into narratives, into stories to be consumed by the public. So pretty much that's what that committee does.
So it's kind of like overseeing, but also making sure the information is gathered correctly, it's implemented correctly, and it's contextualized, right?
Indeed. And there's a voice that we are intentional about portraying. So that's part of it. That's part of the education and research. Yes, we're getting the raw data, the raw materials, and it's just official documents written by someone in power who's left records. And then here it is, we come in and we take this information and we read between the lines, again, to tell the stories, to make visible the invisible, right? Extract the agencies of the lost souls to begin telling the story from their perspective.
I understand you're going through archives. As somebody who's also interested in this area as well, where are you pulling the data exactly from? Elaborate on that a little bit. And I think maybe if other people hear about it too, they might be interested. So can you tell us where exactly you pull that from?
Yeah, no, definitely. So the repository actually exists in different places. So the state of New Jersey archives actually has a home that contains the primary sources that we use to tell the story. Actually, last year, I gave a presentation on the Van Wickle slave ring, well, actually the Lost Souls story, and the state archives actually created a collection for that. So it's easy for people to just go into their website and find that information just to get a better picture of the Van Wickle slave ring and who's participating and things of that nature. In addition, we also consult the Scarlet and Black Slavery Project, housed at Rutgers, New Brunswick. That the Alexander Library, their special collections actually have the certificates of removals. So these certificates of removals are the documents that Judge Jacob Van Wickle used to kind of like sign away the freedoms of these men, women, and children to Louisiana. So these became official documents. In addition, we've partnered with Louisiana State University and their history department because obviously the story ends somewhere, right? And that story actually ends in Louisiana for a lot of the lost souls. So our partnership with that institution, their students actually go into the notarial records. So these are court records, cell slips, and things of that nature, depositions, right? To pull those stories. So Louisiana State University has those records as well, in addition to Virginia. Virginia actually has a collection that we sift through to, again, put this story together.
Can you give us a really basic history of the project itself, the focus, what it concerns, and why it's significant, just for any of our listeners who might not be as familiar with the Lost Souls Project?
Definitely. So the Lost Souls Project actually is a nonprofit organization that seeks to pay tribute to the lives of Black women, children, and men who were actually unlawfully sold out of New Jersey to the South during the domestic slave trade. And they were actually sold by officials who held office of public trust. So what we attempt to do in our work is, again, to illuminate their humanity, and we emphasize their connection to the community. So the lost souls didn't only just come from New Jersey, they came from neighboring states as well. But again, our work is to really find where they came from in these spaces and tell the story of how their removal actually disturbed ecosystems in that sense.
And the people who then sold them into slavery were, at the time, they were like significant members of the community, right? Prominent members of the community.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Prominent members of the community. I mean, it was a syndicate of folks, right? So it's, you have your judges and going all the way up to even the governor. And then we have your regular everyday people who are transporting the enslaved, right? So it's part of a system that Judge Jacob Van Wickle, actually, who lived in South River, present day East Brunswick, he was able to orchestrate through his family members, as well as the judicial system, that court, his colleagues in that space, to orchestrate and facilitate this slavery.
It's fascinating to see there's just common people who are associated, but because of the whole network of this, it really goes all the way to the top of state government. And yeah, that's wow. It's fascinating and horrifying just to see the amount of people, the level of prominence that is affiliated and complicit with this wrongdoing. It's astounding.
Yeah. Right. And we can really see when we talk about this idea of structural racism, we can actually see it makes it clear. And I think when we first started, we really wanted to focus on the lost souls. But you can't focus on what happened to these individuals without really understanding the system that is put in place to allow such deeds to go. I don't want to say unnoticed, because everybody knew that it was happening, but it went unpunished because this is how it was.
And I think that's really great that is the mission of the project, because it should be twofold. It should be putting a spotlight on structural racism and who was associated with it at all of these different layers, but it also should recognize the humanity of the people themselves. And I think it's wonderful that the organization tries to do both and really succeeds in doing both at the same time. So that's really great to hear. And just a note to our listeners, if you'd like a more in-depth look into the origins of the Lost Souls Project, you can listen to our series on it that we just reran on the EBPL podcast. So please go back and listen about the history of the project itself and the people as well. I'd like to shift a little bit toward the research. So are there any updates to the research itself? And has there been a shift to how you conveyed the mission of the project recently?
Yes, there is a shift in who we're focused on. When I came on board a couple of years ago, maybe like 5-6 years now, the story actually centered Van Wickle. So all of the documents, the primary sources that I received was really about the slave trade. Again, we kind of neglected the humans in the story who was being affected by this. And actually, I was brought on to develop the educational material. So that's actually got on board with this project. However, in doing so, looking at these primary sources and then bringing that back to the board, I was like, we really need to focus on their agency, focus on their voices, however way we're going to find them. So fast forward, we began telling the story about their agency, right? Again, looking through the primary sources and finding evidence of their resistance. And that's how we began telling that story. It's because the lost souls, these at least 137 individuals, were sent south. They were sent to Louisiana. They were sent to the main port. The largest port during the domestic slave trade was in New Orleans. So they were sent down to that region and then sold throughout. Specific place that they were sold to was in Pointe-Coupé, which is actually not too far from Baton Rouge, which is where Louisiana State University, that ARC is. So because of its proximity, we decided to kind of formulate this relationship where students already on the ground will be able to go in and secure those records. So pretty much that's how we were able to form that relationship.
It's great to hear about this establishment of the relationship with LSU. Did you do anything to further this relationship personally? Did you go down to where the enslaved people were, being held in that area? Did you experience this personally in any way?
Yes. So we did do more than just visit LSU. We did go down to Pointe-Coupé just to kind of get an idea of like the landscape, what it looked like, the feel of the space. However, on my itinerary was to visit the Whitney Plantation. It's been on my bucket list for a long, long time, long before I knew I'd become a part of this project. However, when I went down to Whitney Plantation in Louisiana, that kind of shifted how I not necessarily told the story, but like focusing on the humanity aspect. Because at the Whitney Plantation, just to give you a picture of what it looks like, you see a lot of little children, right? These statues of children, they really focus on the family, really focus on the community. So with that information, I just came back to New Jersey with a renewed vision of, again, how to center this story and focus on the humanity itself.
And you feel like this was very beneficial for you personally, like in understanding how to conceive of the project itself, you think? Yeah.
Indeed. It was a turning point in the research. So definitely, I mean, even now, how we write about the lost souls is being inspired by scholars who are writing about slavery and going in this new direction. We're actually moving from objectifying or talking about how they were sold or when they were sold or how much they were sold for to, okay, well, how did they live? Right? How did they continue to form communities? How do they maintain bonds? Like, what's the emotionality piece? So that's what we're actually looking at. And to ground our writing, right? So our interns are actually reading work by Sadia Hartman, Lose Your Mother, in addition, Venus in two parts, right? So she kind of helped us with that process. In addition, Marissa Fuentes at Rutgers, again, we're using their text as a foundation to really write about these stories in a way, again, to humanize the lost souls.
That's really great to do that. The research allowed this shift to happen and allowed restoring the humanity of the situation. It's wonderful.
Right. Yeah. And I would also say there works that were written about the lost souls before, I came on board. Sweet Chariot by Anne Malone actually talks about one of the families of the lost souls who was actually able to marry a native down there and produce children and generations after generation, which, these are the stories that we're interested in finding and telling. She was able to find one, but we're interested in finding the others and kind of like talk about those things.
So you mentioned also a lot of scholarly work that's being done in this field of study. Kind of makes me think, is it being taught in public school curriculum anywhere about the Lost Souls Project? Is there an effort to bring that toward public school curriculum, anything like that?
Yeah, so I hear your question in two parts, right? Is it being taught, not necessarily lost souls, but how we're talking about enslaved people? Is it being taught in this particular way in the curriculum, and whether or not Lost Souls Project itself has entered into the public schools? To answer your first question, it's not at the present moment talked about in terms of like the humanity. So as a student of the public school system, I didn't go to school here in New Jersey. I went to school in Florida. However, it was the exact same thing in terms of when we hear about enslaved Black people in terms of our history, it starts with enslavement, but we know that it's not true. There's history before that. However, there's two parts to this story when we're talking about people who are living in bondage. And again, in the education system, they're really at the moment focused on what's happening to these people, as opposed to, again, the communities that they created and nurtured in order to survive. So that's one part. And that's something that we're actually looking at doing with the curriculum that the Lost Souls is currently working on, in addition to the workshops that we'll be hosting, one in May and another one in July for pre-service and in-service teachers. We're actually preparing teachers or providing them with the tool sets, one, to really look at the history of the omission or the exclusion of this element of Black history, right? That family, that community, that emotionality, the differences, the ideologies. In addition, we'll also be training teachers or providing them with the skill sets to go into the archives or actually go online into these resources to look at primary sources and make visible those who have been made invisible. So those are two of the three workshops that we're doing.
That's really great to hear that, the foundational research that the project is doing, once it's all contextualized and like you found so much information, you're able to influence the public, you're able to bring it to them and say, you should know about this. And that it's really wonderful to hear that that's the next step in the development of the project.
And the beauty of it is because it's in our backyard. So when students are children or teachers, when they're walking down the street and they see a name on a street sign, they learned this in the classroom, then that's an opportunity for that child to say, Mom, Dad, I did learn about this. This person did X, Y, and Z. Or when we see numbers on a building, 1855, what does that mean? Right? So there's a story behind these things. So the fact that we're using local history to teach through Black histories, I think is important for us and will make a shift in, again, how we teach history here in New Jersey.
As somebody who drives past Van Wickle Road on my way to work every day, I couldn't agree more. And it's amazing to think about too, like you're saying, a kid could see that and because they're being taught in school, maybe they could inform their parents about what this is, because some of the older generations, like, we didn't get this level of research, this level of study in our public school education. They could receive it, like the kids could receive that, though. That's wonderful. I wanted to move on. If you could discuss some educational or public programs that the Lost Souls Project has contributed to or plans to contribute to in the near future.
Oh, yes. So every year we have like our big events and recitation of names where we honor the legacies of the Lost Souls. That will actually be taking place June 15th at the East Brunswick Community Arts Center. More information will be coming out on our website as well as our social media page. We're also planning on unveiling stories of 4 women in the Lost Souls story, and where we're talking about their stories of resistance and resilience and how they challenged this system that was designed to marginalize them and suppress them to gain their freedom. So that will be taking place at the East Brunswick Public Library. We're going to have an exhibit, so I'm excited about that. We're also in the works of putting together children's programming around one of our 3-pronged mission, right? So one of the 3-pronged mission is actually to build a memorial to the Lost Souls. And what that memorial is actually going to look like is a healing garden. So we know, well, a lot of people don't know, but at least for me, I know, and some in the community do know, that we use plants to resist, to sustain us, to heal us. So we're using these traditional plants to place in an artistic garden that is for the community, but we're also going to be using that garden as a way to educate young children about African culture and just survival in general.
I love that the symbolic nature of the sustenance to that and the endurance of it. Yeah, just like, we're still here, we're going to continue to thrive. It's wonderful.
Right. And it's fitting because we're in a garden state. So it's like,
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like, we're in a garden state. It only makes sense to create this garden.
Amazing. For anybody who's listening, can you let them know if there's any way to reach out to the Lost Souls Project, if there's any way they could get involved with the project? Can you really just let them know how to reach out, how to get involved, anything like that?
Sure. Listen, at the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, we will never turn away help. So in whatever way someone has a talent, a gift, or even want to donate some of their treasures, we are currently in the process of soliciting donations for the Memorial Garden, right? So this is a community event. And one thing I need to say, when we're talking about the Lost Souls story, it wasn't just the Lost Souls who kind of like agitating for their freedom. The community actually pushed forward and elicited the state legislature to kind of put an end to this slave ring. So galvanizing the community to continue to do this work, again, if it's helping us build this garden, that would be amazing. Again, we're also looking for interns to help us with our social media or any other committees that we have. Like we have our education committee, we have our community engagement committees. So we have a variety of committees where anyone who's interested and believe that they can share their talents and their gifts and their treasures, we'll welcome them. They can find us at our website, lostsoulsmemorialnj.org. If they want to contact us for speaking engagements or for intern opportunities, they can send an email at info@lostsoulsmemorialnj.org.
And your organization's also active on
social media. Yeah, we are active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And all they have to do is put our information in and they'll find us.
Krystal, thank you for joining me today on the EBPL podcast to discuss the Lost Souls Memorial Project. This is really an amazing humanitarian effort that you are providing to the community, to the public. And I just want to say thank you for providing all of this information to us about these updates, about the progress your organization is making. So thank you.
And I want to say thank you again on behalf of the board of trustees. It's important for us to take this information that's housed in these buildings and these files and these folders and make it available to the public so that, one, we're aware and we can begin moving towards this idea of democracy that our forefathers have spoken about. So this is what we want for our children. This is what we want for ourselves. Again, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.